Here we're just working on the final part of the shot. We've got the grease pencil of the character previs mesh running up the hill, and I haven't bothered keying that in yet. Last video I was working on making sure the camera and the log were in sync so we can land on this shot, and it works quite well with the grease pencil sketches. So now I'm just using those to put the previs mesh in the right way. So it's just a guide. I'm gonna copy the timing just to start with. This video is at double speed because there is just a lot of tweaking and experimenting here. So I'm just using this grease pencil to literally get what I've already got, and then I'll check it to see what's actually happening in the 3D perspective view. So I'm kind of lining everything up with the camera to make sure this works, but I'm trying to figure out exactly in 3D space how this is going to work as well. So the problem that happens here is I've drawn the Fritz getting quite small when he runs away, which I quite like. But depending on the actual distance of the character and where the camera is, the field of view, the focal length and all that, we're going to get a different effect to what I actually drew. So I could, because this is a cartoon shot, I could cheat this and animate a scale on the character to kind of create a fake sense of the character running away from the screen, running away from the camera. But yeah, because this is 3D, and I kind of want to, whilst there's nothing wrong with creating false perspective or forced perspective, you know, I want to actually make this work. And you can always sometimes get caught out later on when you're rendering and there's lighting and stuff like that. You can actually see what you faked. That's happened to me before. So here I try and actually work out what the distance is needed to make Fritz, you know, get smaller as he runs away from the camera. So I kind of duplicate the previs set here. I like this shot and how the tree looks and everything, so I keep the original just in case I want to go back to it, but also as reference, and I just use soft deform here to kind of match what we had, but actually put the distance between the tree and the camera, and that way when Fritz does is animated in place, I can actually do this properly in 3D space. So these props, this landscape is only a previs as well, so obviously that can change, and I can make sure that Fritz's feet are on the ground and it all works later on. But the character's the main thing here, so I want to get the character's positions all calculated and worked out. So it works with the camera, works with the shot, and works with the kind of motion I've already got going here with the grease pencil. So yeah, just again matching here just to make sure we're keeping what we've got. And then I can turn the grease pencil off, have a look at how it's working, have a look at the timing and the spacing, how it flows, and see if we can make it better and more interesting. So for this part, there is a kind of like an arc that Fritz sweeps up into this shot and then gets smaller and disappears. We also want to make sure he doesn't get close to the tree, too close to the tree, because in the next shot he leaps and grabs the tree, so he kind of flies into it like a bird. So I'm just matching stuff, but also kind of looking in the 3D view as well to make sure, yeah, that he's not flying over the terrain too much, but constantly checking with the camera as well, because at the end of the day we're going to see whatever it is in the camera, so everything is geared towards the camera looking how I want it, looking, you know, getting some nice arcs and framing, because that is the shot. But also looking in the perspective view to make sure it is sort of working I mean, you can cheat this stuff, it is a cartoon shot, but I think if you can get that believability in there and actually keep things somewhat working in 3D space, then it's going to be sort of stronger for it. You sometimes can feel when things are cheated too much. So this is a strange environment, but we want to actually have some depth going on here and not fake it completely. So I'm constantly referring to the actual 3D scene in my perspective view whilst also checking in the top right there with the camera. So now I've kind of got it pretty much as the grease pencil. I'm kind of noticing some stuff I can play with it to add a bit more texture and rhythm to this shot. So even though there was a sort of an arc of him sweeping into the shot and then straight up into the tree, I thought it'd be more interesting to add like a wiggle line, like because he's a cartoon character. You know, when we're offered a straight line, sometimes it's more fun to kind of show the character struggling. So he is struggling. He's racing towards the tree, but he's sort of wiggling his way up again to kind of emphasize the distance he's running and make it more interesting. It's a good opportunity when you have something like this, you know, which is just basically a character running up a hill, but what can you add to it? What character and personality can you add to it? So I thought it'd be kind of funny to have him wiggling up there. It makes it more interesting for the eye. And we can kind of play with how far he gets. It's setting up almost like this thing he's trying to get to, but he never quite gets to it. Because again, running away in perspective for animation in terms of spacing, the spacing is getting closer, and then for the characters kind of slowing down because he's running away, and the sense of distance is different. There's also like a nice little trench here between the two meshes, the two hills. So there's like the sandbank that he lands on, and there's like a little bit of a hill to hide where the hill starts. So I'm having the character kind of run up that into the air and then kind of like dip down and then carry on up, so he kind of gets obscured from the camera by that little hill. So again, it's kind of adding an up movement to anticipate, or should I say we're going up and then down to anticipate the final up. So that wasn't in my grease pencil plan, but I'm kind of looking at the pre-vids environment here and trying to add a bit more to the character. So again, it kind of adds to his struggle as well. He's trying to get up to that tree in the distance, and straight away he's getting sort of pulled down. It's helping to emphasize his struggle. So I play with a bit here. It's basically a, you know, again, timing and spacing, the bouncing ball principles. You know, you could just do this with a sphere just to get it all working, to make sure there's enough time and space for this action. If there isn't, then, you know, maybe don't have it or make it smaller. But if you're going to have something like this, you know, you need to check it works. There's enough time. You're not just kind of rushing stuff, because the audience needs to enjoy it. Some of these little actions are just like little things added in there, but I think you need to work out whether you really want it or not, whether there really is the time and the space to have it. So I found there was enough time and space here, and I think it adds a lot, like a nice cartoony squash and stretch. If you can get one in there or two in there, you know, it adds a lot more fun for the animator and also the audience, I think. So again, he's manipulating the mesh here just to kind of make sure he's not going through it. And the 3D view just to keep the hill shape, but also make sure it makes sense for the characters' positions. Yeah, so we're getting the scale there. He is actually shrinking away, but it's all because of distance. It's not because I'm actually animating it. So what I do here, I think, is I want to try slowing him down when he gets closer to the tree, because obviously he's further away. He's covering this fast distance, but it's going to be slowing down a bit. But because I'm doing the weaving with the X and the Z axes in the graph editor, that doesn't really work. So what I do is I add an animation layer to this control that controls where Fritz is. And then I just kind of layer on top of this motion I've already got. So I've got him moving across. It works, and he's weaving. But this animation layer, I can start maybe like slowing things down and moving things around a bit more, adding even more wiggle and texture to it, so it isn't quite as computerized. It's not just a curve on a graph and he sweeps across. You can maybe add more to the weave or add an offset to the weave. So when he goes left at one point, he actually goes a bit further. This is something this sort of texturing is done in a lot of animated films, where, like for example, Scrat in Ice Age, where he hops around. The hops are kind of different, or they have a rhythm, but then there's one that just pings up or pings down or is higher, just to kind of offset stuff and throw it off a bit to keep the character alive, because otherwise it is just a computer feeling to things. You want to add a bit more. You want to have cycles of movement, but you want to add a little bit of noise to it, a little bit of life to it. So things like just swinging left and right or scaling down in a kind of computerized way, you kind of throw things off a bit. So adding a layer is a nice way to non-destructively just add on top of what you've already got and play around a bit and experiment non-destructively. And if you don't like what you've done, you just switch the layer off or delete the layer and start again, or maybe you find that you don't need it. And you can also scale the opacity of the layers effects down as well. So here I'm just kind of adding to the wiggle. I'm just trying to, it's kind of just straight ahead, eyeing it, just playing it back over and over again, and just sort of picking out little bits where maybe the curve is can be accentuated more or exaggerated more, or toned down a bit on one of them and keep them going up. Keep pushing one of them and maybe turning one of them down a bit, and just kind of keeping that wobble that I'm trying to get there, but making it not uniform, making it more organic looking, just by layering on top. I find that very useful layers. I think once you get into them, they are really a fantastic tool. But this is basically just time and spacing and a bouncing ball that's going to be my reference for when I do get the full character rig in there. I want to get this action and speed and momentum kind of nailed before I bother bringing in a character. In my previous videos I've spoken about this workflow. It means I can quickly get something going, I can frame a shot, I can get the character moving around without worrying about legs and arms and stuff like that. Make sure everything's framed correctly, the motion feels right, the rhythm, and it's good practice anyway. If you can get this right, you've got a nice plan. I like working in motion. I like seeing what I've already got, so I don't tend to like working in stepped stuff. And I kind of like having a bit of breathing space between some of the main actions I've got to put in straight ahead things. Just things like while I'm watching it, my brain is filling in gaps and creating ideas. So I add more stuff in. And that'll probably happen when I bring the character rig in as well. I'll use this as a reference, but I'll add even more rhythm and texture if there's enough frames and time. More squashes and stretches, more little bits and bobs. So I don't want to add too much animation to this, but I do want it to feel alive and animated. So yeah, there's a lot of playing back here. I'm just making sure it fits in with the rest of the shot. So I've given this end bit here a bit of love and attention, but there's this whole sequence just before it of the log the character's riding through the water suddenly comes to an end, and he hits the shoreline and comes flying off. So now I've got this nice momentum running up the hill. I want to make sure the momentum before it is all part of it as well. And this is what a process of going through a shot and planning it out is in previs, or just animation generally, is just picking a part of the shot, giving it some attention, getting it to a point where it feels good, and it's what you feel is it has enough information in it that it's holding its own, and then you go and look at other parts of the shot. So here I changed the log hits the shore a bit earlier than it did, so we can send Fritz flying earlier and have a few more frames to get a nice arc from him coming off this this log. So this is more of him. He's not jumping off the log, and he's not getting. He's not completely surprised by it either. So it's not like he just isn't paying attention and he hits the shore and flies off either. So it's more like a controlled thing, because he's trying to get to the tree. That's his main thing. So he's using everything between him and the tree to get to the tree. So this is more like a controlled sort of flying off the log, and him hitting the shore, and then racing off to continue the other stuff that we've done. So yeah, you can see I've moved my range, and we're looking on this now, and it's the same kind of thing of playing it back and forth, getting things in the right position. Again, it's all timing and spacing. The other thing here is, and I mentioned it before in a previous video, is there's a jump, or there's Fritz flying through the air. So it needs to because the camera is locked to the position of the log, we need to kind of manipulate the camera to make sure the frame has enough space in it for Fritz to kind of do his nice jump and we can see it. Because otherwise it might just feel like a lot of stuff's flashing around and the character moves up and then down. But we want to get the arc of the jump across the camera space. So I have to adjust the camera a bit here as well. So in the 3D view, I'm checking to make sure the character is actually flying through the air and he's not hitting any walls. The curves all make sense. So you can see like there's a nice arc in the perspective window. So that means it is making sense, and it is, he is flying off that log, and there is a nice arc through the air. You can maybe hold him a bit in the air because we've been a cartoon character, so we can feel it, and then he kind of lands with the squash and stretch. But the shot camera, which ultimately is the most important view, isn't giving us that arc. We're not seeing it because the camera is flying across the world with Fritz and the log. So what I do is I alter the camera so that the camera kind of swings round, leaving some space on the right hand side of the screen. So Fritz starts on the left hand side of the screen, and then we can see the arc of him flying across the screen and landing. Yeah, here we go. I'm selecting the camera here and moving it to keep Fritz on the left, because I know this is coming up. I guess it's also giving the audience a bit of a chance to see that something's coming and feel that something's coming. So I alter the camera. The shot cam in the top right needs to work. We need to see the arc of the jump like we do in the perspective window. So if I know it works in the perspective window, I know it is all there. It's just we need to make sure the camera's in the right place to capture it. So I kind of offset the camera a bit here, so it's not quite just tracking the log that's speeding across the level. The character is going quite fast as well on this log. He's covering quite a long distance. But again, it is important to make sure that things are making some sense in the real world in the perspective view, because if you fake everything in the camera, then you can kind of get stuck when things don't make sense and things aren't. At least I know if that is making sense, I just know that the camera's in the wrong place and it's not getting it properly. So here we go, the character gets to fly across. Make sure he's not hitting any walls, he doesn't stop or slow down in the air. You don't really, when you're flying through the air at speed, you're not really going to be able to have your air brakes and just stop. And I don't want the character to look like that. I want it to look like they are actually flying through the air. It's something in a lot of students. Here we go, look, I'm clearing up the curves and just checking. There's something that happens in a lot of student work, is that the characters hit an invisible wall and it's jarring, and it kind of just destroys, it quickly just ruins the illusion of life and movement and momentum, because you're kind of going, you're de-accelerating or decelerating something where there shouldn't be anything that stops it or slows it down. And it's something that all animators have to look out for and polish, and make sure things are in the right place. It's part of the spacing principle of animation. So yeah, the graph editor is open here at the bottom just to make sure the curves are somewhat making sense. We're moving a lot in the Z and the X. Z seems to be a bit more across the screen. So yeah, just make sure those curves make sense again, that it isn't just a big jolt in the movement because I've decided the character's about to land. Yeah, it completely ruins everything if it looks premeditated. So yeah, it's just about this thing hitting and stopping, and the character keeps going. Got to keep the momentum of the character flying across the screen so he can land. I did at the end of this decide that I'll come up after watching it a few times thinking, well, maybe actually I don't want him landing on the beach and then kind of bouncing back only to do another up and down movement afterwards with the going down into the trench before going to the hill. So I decided to work on, after this in another video, making this all one movement, so he kind of flies off the log and then holds in air for a bit, maybe cycling with his legs, very cartoony, kind of hold in the air, and then he dips down into the trench and then flies up the hill. So I make it all one move,